Hello everyone and welcome to Mountain Moments. This is Judith the Garden and this is the prepper portions. Now I'm going to tell you right off the bat, this one is scripted, so you might see me looking away from the camera more than just relying on my notes. There are a lot of things, details in this one I do not want to miss. I want to make sure I cover everything. So if you see me relying more on my script or my notes today, this is why. I have in the last couple weeks, had several ladies ask me about drying herbs. And I want to show you 3 quick and easy ways to accomplish that task. Drying herbs is one of the first things I learned when I was getting into prepping, and it is wonderful to do. You can provide for yourself. You know where they came from, what's in them, what's not, and if you're raising them organic, you know exactly what they're worth. All right, so that is what we're going to discuss today. First, let me say, several herbs tend to be a bit higher in moisture content than others. I have found that lemon balm, rosemary, oregano, lavender, and all the mints, plus sage and basil can fit into this category. These may not dry as quickly as some of the lower moisture herbs such as dill, cilantro, and parsley. Just keep that in mind as we walk through 3 different methods for drying your own herbs. All right, method number 1. This method simply uses an actual dehydrator. Now, many people believe that you have to go out and spend a large sum of money and buy an expensive model to start with. And I've been dehydrating fruits, vegetables, herbs, and more for about 3 decades. My very first dehydrator, I think it was cost about $29. You know, the $29.99 special, and it was a simple one similar to this one I have now. It worked wonderfully until the day it broke down. I loved that dehydrator so much, even though I read about all the great wonders of these expensive ones. I decided when I was going to get back into it recently, a couple years ago, I was just going to buy the same kind of model. Now, I couldn't find the one that I originally had. It had a bottom motor to it, and I actually didn't like the bottom motor anyway. I found that a lot of times things fell down into it as they were drying. And I would hear constant. The worst one is peas and corn. If a pea or a corn kernel fall down into that motor, it was a terrible sound. So I love the fact that American Harvest has changed their model to be a top fan model. This one is nice. Now I do wish that it had some sort of a little screen or something over the fan that had smaller pieces. I don't know, maybe like the mesh in this would stop peas and corn, no, and herbs from being sucked up in there. I've noticed that sometimes when the herbs dry, or like spinach dries, it's so lightweight it can get sucked up against there. What I've learned to combat that actually is to take a second mesh screen and I set it upside down on top of the herbs as they're drying. So I don't feel that I need to own a very expensive model. Now, my husband and I were recently talking about adding trays to this. I've never added more than 8 trays to a unit. I prefer to only go about 6. So he suggested what we do is buy a second model. That way I have a backup too. If one blows, I got the second one on hand, especially if I'm in the middle of something, which is usually when something breaks down. I will tell you that about 1.5 years or so ago, 2 years ago, I bought this one and it was only $49. It is now $89. So it has gone up in price dramatically. However, I still recommend this one. The only thing that I do not like about my model for some reason is the quick key here that tells you what temperature to dehydrate foods on. that has worn off for some reason, but the temperature dial is still perfectly there. It does not have a timer. Some people prefer to have a timer, but I don't dry overnight all that often, and I also don't sleep long. So if I am dehydrating overnight, it is usually something like corn, peas that is really heavy, gonna, I know, take that amount of time at least to dehydrate. So I will put it in right before going to bed, check it when I wake up in the morning, let it go a couple more hours if it's a heavy duty, high moisture product like that. So I don't feel I need a timer. I watch my products as they dehydrate. So that is my model. When it comes to the missing temperature guide on the lid, every model came with a book, and that book manual is available online as well. So if you need to, you can reference things there, easy peasy. You can just go ahead and go there, pull up your temperatures. I also have several cookbooks on top of the refrigerator that talk about dehydrating, so I can also refer to that, except for if it's beef jerky. Beef jerky I'm very cautious of because there are changing temperatures on that sometimes. When I first started, they were at a lower temperature. So the third thing I do wish is that I had bought a square one originally, because I think it would have fit better on my counter in the corner. However, having perused online, I actually think buying the round one is easier and better. I do believe that the round one, it seems additional trays and screens as well as fruit roll-up trays are more available and readily available as round than as square. So, and they can be a little bit less expensive depending on the retailer. Since I already own a round one, I will be buying a second round one when I'm able to fit it into our budget, because that way I can run the two at a time, or if need be, borrow racks from one and interchange them into the other. And that way I can double stack. I can add 6 trays to this one if I'm dehydrating a lot of spinach, and leave a couple of trays in the other one to dry something else. Now, there are a couple reasons why I'm also looking at 2 different units, 2 separate ones, and that is, let's face it, some herbs are pungent. Lavender, for example, drying really imparts an intriguing flavor to your oregano and cilantro. and when they're done together, it is not good. It is not a flavor I would enjoy. Onions and chives also impart a fragrance to lavender that if you're taking a bath in your lavender, you are not going to want it to smell like onions and chives, or if you're taking a tea. So you want to I want to make sure that I'm able to do that. In the past, with one unit, I would ensure that I'm drying only certain things at a time. Like, for example, I will not dry mint and lemon balm together. Lemon balm is a gentle herb. It tends to be more mild, and the mint we grow is very pungent. I don't want them to conflict with each other if I'm making teas. So I will dry mint one day, wash my trays, dry lemon balm the next. So that's how we do it here. All right, so for method number 2, this method would be using your oven. Now my oven does not go below 170 degrees, so I could never use my oven. It is also not a convection oven, so it will not have air circulation. I could still use it if I wanted to, but as I mentioned in the drying greens video, I would end up more likely cooking the herbs rather than drying them. But I'm going to walk you through how you can dry herbs in your oven. First, you're going to need some oven-safe baking racks or cooling racks. I have 3 that are stackable. I'm going to show you just 2 right now. Oops. There we go. As you can see, they stack nicely. What you can do is you can take your herbs. Now, the mint is big enough that you could leave it together or peel the leaves off. Now the first thing you want to do is take off any of the brown leaves. I picked this a couple days ago, so unfortunately some of it has gone more brown than I would have liked. And then you just take that and you stretch it over your tray I'll show you that in a moment. Make sure you take off any leaves also that have slug bites on them. Yeah, we have some creative slugs around here. They enjoy the mint as well. And then you would simply take your herbs, continuing to do that all the way across. I'm going to take some that have some bad leaves. Bad example. And you're going to simply do that all the way across your tray. Now I will say the trays that are more mesh would be better to use than these. These are older, so they are what I have. And the reason why I say that is because you could actually then take your herbs and remove the leaves and use more like a dehydrating tray from the electric dehydrator. For that, you would simply do this and set aside your stems for herbs that are savory, such as oregano, and I will explain why in a moment. So if you were going to do your leaves, you just want to lay them in a layer. Again, like so. And then you would place them in your oven and allow them to dehydrate in there. It is very simple to use your oven. Now the optimal temperatures to dehydrate things like the herbs would be about 115 degrees. Some recommend 95 to 115. I like to dry mine as quickly as possible, so I tend to aim for 110, 115. If your oven does not go that low, you can, as I said, still use it, but you want to keep an eye on the herbs so that they don't cook or burn. You don't want to overcook them. And I would not leave them alone overnight in an oven. Just my personal advice and personal preference. I would want to keep a very close eye on them if I'm using the oven. So I have used an oven as a dehydrator before, and it worked wonderfully. I did have at the time an oven that had a setting of 150 degrees, and it was a convection oven which allowed air circulation, so that was what I used. So if your preset temperature is low enough, go ahead and give it a try if you don't have a dehydrator yet. But make sure you have oven safe racks to be using. Some are plastic coated and you don't want to put that in the oven. You can stack them together inside your oven and place them very carefully when you're doing that so that you don't spill any herbs down in the bottom. I also have been known, if I'm doing anything like that in the oven, I will put a catch-all tray of some kind, whether it's a stoneware with a 1-inch lip or a 13 by 9 by 2, whatever fits under your rack size. Just in case anything does, as it dries, trickle down. You'll catch it. Now, what to do with your stems. If you're using a savory herb, like oregano, basil, or one of those, parsley, things like that. What I do is I take, because I use my dehydrator, and I pinch off the leaves like so. Very easy to do. Set those on my dehydrator tray, and then I take the stem and I set it aside. And then what I do later, when I've got my pile of savory stems, now mint will not go well in this recipe, but I put those aside, and I simply take the savory stems and throw them in my garbage soup bag. It's the perfect place to put them. Now I will tell you, I have tried the method where you take a strainer and you try to pull the leaves down backwards on the stem. I've ended up in such a disaster with that. I can't do that. So rather than waste my herbs, I simply pick the leaves, pluck them off. It's easy enough for me to do. Just take some time and do it. Listen to a good video or music while you're doing it. Talk to the kids. And then you take your stems, like I said, and put them in your garbage soup bag, because now you have herbs already in your garbage soup mixture. And you won't have to add as many. So that's what I do with the savory stems. Now let's talk about method number 3. Many people are going to tell you that you cannot dehydrate or dry the heavy moisture herbs any other way than using some form of mechanical drying, and that is not true. When you think about it, for a long time, there was no such thing as a dehydrator. For a long time, there was no such thing as an oven. And they were able to dry herbs very simply, very easily, and they just did it. How did they do it? The same way I'm going to show you right now. Now, normally I use white cotton thread. I cannot find my spool of white cotton thread in any of my buckets because I'm in the process of cleaning closets at the same time as putting in the garden, and I haven't found where I hid that. So here's what you do if you're going to dry the higher moisture herbs. Again, please forgive my mint. It looks very worse for wear. I should have picked fresh today. You simply grab your herbs in a bunch. You want to wash them and make sure they're clean. Wash off any dirt, or in my case, slug bites, slug slime. And you take your herbs, and I tie them somewhat loosely with my cotton thread. After they've been washed, you want to make sure that you, again, if you have a salad spinner, spin them off if you can. If not, shake them dry. I will often lay them out on a towel or a paper towel, and then I take them and bundle them like this, and then I just simply tie a knot, and you can hang that in a non-dusty location to dry until they are ready, and then you can break off the leaves and toss the stems of the mint. I haven't found a use for those yet. If it's a savory herb like the oregano, let me show you how I would do that. A simple bundle of oregano. You simply do the same process as you did with the mint. You tie it. Again, you want to tie it tightly, but gently. And there you have a bundle of oregano ready to dry. Now, another thing I have been known to do to protect my herbs so that they don't get dust on them, I have been known to take brown paper bags. Lunch bags work great. Those are inexpensive ones you can get at the store. When they're dry, simply put them inside the bag and tie the bag off. I use a twisty tie to tie the bag off and keep it closed. It helps keep your herb dust free while drying. Also, the paper bag has a tendency to pull the moisture out of the herbs. So there you go. That's one thing that you can do. Now, I will say, as your herb dehydrates, the stems dehydrate, they get smaller. So you may find you need to go back and check the stem and tie it again a little bit tighter. And there you go. And it will still continue to dehydrate. Now, one thing I will say that I love to use paper bags for also is seed catching. Now, I'm not dehydrating these. These are, I'm trying to remember, these are Japanese bunching onions, and these are the seeds. Unfortunately, both stalks broke in the garden yesterday when I wasn't ready for them to be broken yet. I'm not 100% sure that the seeds are ready and they will be viable, but we're going to dry them anyway. And when we dry them, we're going to put them in a paper bag because as the seeds fall off, I'll be able to catch them. For this, I don't need to tie them off. I can just simply twist tie with my extra large twisty tie, which comes from, by the way, my lettuce and my fresh greens. Waste not, want not. And then I can just take this and hang it using a bent, out of shape paper clip from a rack I have in the laundry room. And the seeds will fall into the bag when they are ready. So I hope that this has helped give you some great ideas on how to save your herbs from your garden. Don't be afraid to give it a try. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the comments below. I will be happy to answer them. You can also reach me through TorahForWomen.com using the contact form, TorahForWomen.com, and also at BiblicalPrepping.com. We have a contact form there as well. And remember, waste not, want not. It is time for us. We're young enough to remember talking to our grandparents or great-grandparents. It's time for us to think like they did throughout the Great Depression and save what we can, use what we can. Blessings and shalom.